I think companies have known that it's always been possible, but there was always an easy path to what they could do and a hard path to what
Yeah.
they could do. The easy path was to throw more money at what works and just make it bigger. And the hard path was actually to fundamentally figure out how to continue to do more with less.
So, Karen Hao, thank you for joining us. Really, really good to talk to you. Let me just ask you this first of all. This emergence of DeepSeek, it's being compared to a kind of new tech revolution, a tech industrial revolution, the
Hmm.
importance of which simply cannot be overstated. Do you share that view?
Think it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but certainly do think that this is a very important and significant moment that has a lot of lessons for how we should be thinking about the future of AI development. But yeah, I don't know that I would go so far as to paint it as a tech revolution of the scale of industrial revolution.
Okay, that's an interesting downbeat tone compared to some of the hype that we've heard over the last couple of days. It does look, I've got to say, pretty dramatic from where I'm sitting. I want to just explore that with you. I want to come to what it means for governments and for state agencies in a moment. Can we just talk for a second about private corporations? What can private corporations, Karen, contemplate doing now in this post-DeepSeek world that maybe didn't seem quite so possible before?
So what's interesting is I think what DeepSeek has done has always been possible, and I think companies have known that it's always been possible. But there was always an easy path to what they could do and a hard path to what
Yeah.
they could do. The easy path was to throw more money at what works and just make it bigger. And the hard path was actually to fundamentally figure out how to continue to do more with less.
Mhm.
And why take the hard path when the easy path is accessible to you? DeepSeek just didn't have that easy path accessible to them because of the geopolitical situation.
Mm.
And I guess to not speak so much in like euphemisms and at the high level, essentially what we've seen in the last few years with AI development is that there has been a dogma that has developed that scaling AI models, and scaling meaning making them astronomically large with huge swaths of internet data trained on extraordinarily large data centers,
Mhm.
has been the way to reach AI progress. And this was never within the AI industry, this was never understood as the only way. And or scientifically the somehow dictated by the laws of physics. It was never understood that way. It was always understood as more of a choice that was made because of business reasons and other reasons, that this is just an easy, methodical, predictable path towards
Mm.
more and more AI progress. But what DeepSeek basically did was the hard path of actually, we're going to completely unravel this assumption that we can pump more and more, we should be pumping more and more money and more data centers into the development of this technology. And let's just try doing the exact same thing with significantly fewer chips.
Yeah.
And yeah, they pulled it off. And so it's really an illustration of actually what has been long known within the AI expert community, that it is possible to take that hard path. But the thing is, I think that for the public and for policymakers, this might be a surprise
Yeah.
because of the kind of message that the AI industry, Silicon Valley, has really shoved down the throats of global policymakers, that we just need bigger, and bigger
Yeah.
means better.
And yeah, so this was, in that sense, foreseen. We're not talking about a revolutionary breakthrough in AI science here, but what did seem so expensive, and for that reason alone, just more inaccessible, now looks affordable and accessible, and that will
Yeah.
spread, and that will spread across the corporate world as the AI revolution, forgive the use of that term, as that rolls out. Can I just ask you about government and state agencies then? What about those government and state agencies, the welfare agencies in this country, the health service, law enforcement, the military, the list goes on. Is it now going to be possible, Karen, to develop and to roll out systems much more easily and more quickly, which will dramatically change what they do?
So I think to answer this question, I kind of have to step back a little bit and talk about just one kind of baseline um, thing that to add a little bit more nuance is that AI is actually a name for many different technologies. There are many
Mm.
different types of AI. And what DeepSeek and OpenAI and what we've seen all of the companies really focus on in recent years
Yes,
is large language models, generative AI. That is actually a really tiny sliver of the broader AI technology pie.
sure, sure.
Um, and what you're talking about with government agencies, like, are they going to now be like supercharged with AI? Actually, a lot of government agencies have adopted AI a long time ago, but a very different form of AI, a lot more just small, algorithmic systems that are doing things like welfare distribution, unemployment benefits
Yes,
distribution. And frankly, those have not been successful case studies in AI adoptions. Like the track record on government trying to gain efficiencies by automating away certain processes has actually been really, really bad.
yeah. Look,
There have
just
just
on
been
that
like,
point, Karen,
yeah,
we know now. This was reported this week that in this country, in the United Kingdom, the welfare department, the work and pensions department, have been experimenting with different forms of AI to manage our welfare system. Now, there've been a
yeah,
number of different trials. They have failed one after another, and they're going to go on with those trials until they reach one that actually works. But we're now looking at a system which will be simply cheaper to have, one which
yeah,
you can have at lower cost, which will not require the kind of power that needs a whole new grid, that needs modular nuclear reactors to make it
yeah.
work. Suddenly, it all seems more realistic and more attainable.
Yeah, just certainly I think there will be a lot of governments that will be really enticed to now try and rush into adopting generative AI,
Yes.
where before they were using, older forms of AI. What they're actually going to gain, I'm not sure. And I think they should be using the other failures of AI adoption as really a historical case study and lessons that they should learn as well, that maybe they actually shouldn't be rushing into the adoption of these
Mm.
Gen AI
Well,
tools.
they won't be adopting systems that don't work. They won't be adopting systems which are plainly flawed. They'll have to carry on with that process of trial and error. But maybe they can just make more progress more quickly on a bigger scale.
I think it would be quite difficult to pull that off,
Mm.
because typically what we've seen is governments assume that something works and then they deploy it, and then it turns out that there's actually really egregious failures.
Mm.
And
Well, that's got to be a risk.
unfortunately,
That's got to be a risk. Yeah, but
yeah, and
I think you're
unfortunately, I
probably
think with
you're
Gen
right there.
AI, it could just happen. That cycle could just happen faster. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily know that it'll happen better.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting warning. I mean, I think you're probably right. The governments will want to embrace this, maybe quicker than ever. Maybe it'll be cheaper. They'll want to do it. The benefits there are there, tantalizingly hanging before them. We'll just have to see
Yeah,
how that process rolls out. Now, in
yeah.
America, we've got the new president, Donald Trump, who's just removed the guardrails on AI that were put in place by Joe Biden. What risks will that open up?
I just yeah, a lot of risks. You know, one of the biggest challenges that I see with AI development, in the way the trajectory that it's on right now, is that it really is a tool that can undermine democracy. And I don't mean, some people will automatically assume that I'm talking about like US AI versus Chinese AI. That is
Yeah,
actually not what I mean at all.
right.
I'm talking about how these American companies in Silicon Valley have really started to exert influence, consolidate extraordinary amounts of power, and exert influence through their AI technologies on core democratic institutions, not just in the US, but in democratic nations around the world.
For an
And
example, give me an example of this.
yeah, so for example, the degree of misinformation that is now able to be spread because of how easily it's possible to automate the generation of misinformation is really eroding, further accelerating the erosion of trust in the media. The fact that they have taken the model of um, a really resource intensive AI development approach that requires large data centers, those data centers most often set up shop in rural communities that are already really disempowered.
Yeah.
And those rural communities think that they're signing up for a lot of like a economic investment. But in the long run, what happens is that data center is actually taking up their drinking water resources. It is taking up their energy resources and making their power less reliable. And it is extending the life of coal and gas plants and increasing the air pollution in those communities. And one of the biggest vulnerabilities of democracies are people feeling incredibly disempowered and feeling like they don't even have control over their basic fundamental rights of access to clean water, clean
Yeah.
air, and
Yeah.
reliable energy. And so that is the biggest risk that I see, is that the Trump administration is now unraveling the guardrails for Silicon Valley to keep on doing this playbook. And it could lead to the continued exacerbation of people feeling disempowered. And we haven't even talked about, people fearing the loss of their jobs
Yes.
because the companies have taken the work of creatives and not actually compensated them for them, and now automated away their jobs, and they're now coming after other industries and so on and so forth. So,
Is
so that is the
there a bit
real
of
risk, is that we don't actually have a way to contain. We don't have, whether there's no legal framework right now to contain those trends from accelerating.
yeah, and the loss of human employment is going to be a massive, massive challenge. I must just finally ask you about security. I mean, we've got public figures in this country, many of them, who won't use these AI apps now because they think they're going to be spied on by China. They think their data is going to be harvested. How will DeepSeek change that? Presumably, those fears will certainly be no less.
Yeah, so DeepSeek is a really interesting case study in that they have completely open sourced their model. So you can interact with the model through a website or an app, just like ChatGPT, but you can also go online and just download a copy of it onto your computer, and then
Yes,
it's not connected to anything. It's not
great.
connected to the company servers. You have control over the data. And in that version, it is actually much safer in terms of data privacy than any of the American companies that are serving you models and getting your data in return, or well, I guess European companies, you have GDPR, so you're great there. But yeah, and I've gotten questions today as well about what about the censorship that's baked into DeepSeek, because it follows Chinese censorship
Yes.
rules. Open source is also really interesting in that since DeepSeek posted their open source model online, there have been hundreds of copies of DeepSeek made by AI developers who are now modifying
Ah,
the basically the source code to actually get rid of those censorship filters for not a
right.
non-Chinese
Yes.
use
Yeah.
case.
There was an example. There was an
And
example of someone using the system to try and get information on Tiananmen Square, and it didn't
yeah,
work. There was a plain piece of baked-in Chinese censorship, and you're saying because it's open source, that can just be rewritten. That censorship can be
exactly.
wiped out. Karen, it's been
Yeah.
so great to get your thoughts on this. What a remarkable story. You sound very cool about the whole thing. That's probably because you spend every minute of every day thinking about this. But to someone like me, I tell you, it is truly, truly eye-boggling. Karen Ho, good to talk to you.